Hey there, welcome to Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of Indiana. As a new therapist who's been practicing for about 2 years now, there are some skills that I wish that I learned when I began. So whether you're an intern or in graduate school, or you're a new therapist like myself, I thought I'd put 4 skills out there that will dramatically improve your practice of ACT. So go ahead and grab a piece of paper and a pen and write down these 4 skills that'll really take your practice of ACT to the next level. The first is flexibility. Now, Mike Tyson had a great quote when he said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." Now, he's talking about boxing and how you prepare for boxing. I mean, everybody's got a plan, I'm sure, when they get in the ring. But once they get punched in the face, they have to deviate. They have to figure out a way to adapt. And that's not only applicable in boxing, but also in life, and especially in the practice of ACT. Now, in ACT, our aim is psychological flexibility. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, that's giving the client an ability to choose their behavioral responses instead of automatically doing it. So if they have a thought or a feeling or a memory or a sensation, they're not trapped by that. They don't have to follow it automatically. They can have a choice. And so we're training and teaching that through all these 6 core processes. Now, for new therapists, I want to recommend that you don't be afraid to go off script, because sometimes our plans just aren't workable in the session. We can have an idea for where to go next with the client, but sometimes that client will come in and they're just having a bad day or a bad week, or maybe they're having an anniversary of a loss and they're grieving. And so they can be in a totally different place. Even though they're presently in the room, they can be somewhere else mentally, emotionally, and maybe having these sensations. So the fact that they show up, that's progress, okay? And that's something that we can work with. But from there, we need to be able to go off script, be able to adapt, and to practice some flexibility. So how do we do this? Well, I would recommend using regulation exercises to help get the client back in the room. Now, this is really something that you can use a variety of techniques, but I find just stopping them when they say something that looks like they're lost in thought, or it looks like they're starting to well up with tears, and just have them do something else. So you may say, "Hey, let's stop. I want you just to take a deep breath through your nose, and I want you to exhale slowly." And then ask them, what sensations are you feeling in your body? Another way is you can transform the thought or transform the feeling and say, "Hey, I'm really hearing that you're experiencing some anger today. If you could tell me what that might look like, or what object would that be? What image comes to mind?" And that helps them to activate their thinking side of their brain instead of just the emotional side. And you can help them to get some space to have some flexibility. Now, these are things you can do with the client, but really yourself as a therapist, you're in the room. And so having that ability to not get locked into your plan and where you want to go in the session, and being able to pivot and help that client, as long as it's serving their goals, it's really worthwhile to have that ability to be flexible. Now, rigidity itself is a sign of psychological inflexibility. So helping a client to see an alternative perspective can help them choose the next behavior with a little bit more space. And for us as a therapist, it's really important that we practice that as well. We need to ask ourselves, why am I so intent to see this happen? What is it about my plan that has to happen right now? Can I take a step back and see this from a different angle? How is my client experiencing this? Those things will start to help you get some space and practice flexibility. So this is something I'd say we need to start practicing this year. Now, the second skill that new therapists need this year to really take their practice of ACT to the next level and improve lives of their clients is something called clarifying values. Clarifying values is something that when I started out, I knew it was part of ACT, but I saw it as something like, we're going to get to that in future sessions when we talk about that process of values. But what I've come to see as a new therapist is that this is something that's an ongoing process, meaning you're going to find this happens naturally in a session. And so you need to get good at clarifying those values for the client when it happens. Now, how can we do that? Well, the use of reflections to help clients to notice and name their values seems to be paramount. Now, what do I mean by reflections? Well, there's two kinds of reflections that are really, really excellent to use. One is simple reflections, and that's simply repeating back word for word what that client said. So they may say something like, my family is everything to me. And what I would say as a simple reflection is, family is everything to me. And even saying that helps that client to stop their conversation to me and really think about what they just said and the importance of their family, because that's a value. The second way is to use a complex reflection. Now, complex reflection is the therapist saying what the client has said, but they're paraphrasing it in a brief way and adding new meaning to it. So that same client may say, my family is everything to me. And I may say, it sounds like your family is so important to you that everything else blurs out. And the client will either nod and agree and then go on, or they may clarify for me that, well, it's not that it blurs everything out. It's just that that's something that's so important that I want to do whatever it takes. Okay, so you're using these simple and complex reflections to help echo back and clarify what that value is for the client. Now, it's important to place the problems in the context of serving their values. So when a client says, my family is everything to me, and family is a value of theirs, well, then you can look for things that are problems for them and that are blocking that value, or maybe it's not in the service of that value. And so you may say something like, it sounds like this hurts so much because it's important to you. And a client will then elaborate even further. And I think for a client, what I've seen is it increases their motivation to change the more and more in touch they are with their values. So clarify values is a skill that new therapists can learn. It'll really expedite the process of therapy. Now, the third skill that you need as a new therapist is to interrupt fusion. Now, this is something that's going to happen in the therapy room where a client becomes fused with a thought, and it can really cause disruption if this is done poorly. A client can become more resistant. They can shut down. They can start to blame you as a therapist. And so being able to interrupt them as they're becoming fused is a skill that we really need to get good at. So how do you spot fusion? Well, if you've had that experience yet, whether an internship or as a new therapist, you'll be talking with the client, maybe asking them a question. And as the client begins to talk, they actually exit the room. Their body is still there, but mentally or emotionally, they go to a different place. It's like they time travel to the past as they ruminate on an issue, or they become angry when they begin to retell a story of when they were angry. Or they'll time travel to the future, maybe being worried or concerned or having a flood of emotions of uncertainty, and it starts to affect them as they're in the room. And as a therapist, you're there to listen, right? And so you don't want to interrupt. You've been taught in graduate school, avoid interruptions. But I'm telling you to interrupt fusion. It's a skill and it's something that's important. Now, it's not important because you want them to stop feeling or you want them to not process their thoughts. No, you want them to look at their thought or at their emotion instead of from their thought or emotion. You want them to get good at noticing and observing what's happening in the room. So when you stop them, it's to practice something that you want them to learn and practice outside of session. Now, cognitive diffusion exercises are tools to interrupt fusion and get the client back in the room. But before we get into a cognitive diffusion exercise, we need to consider the function of that thought. What is the client doing as a result of the thought? They're no longer engaged in the present moment, and they're avoiding their experiences of the here and now. The question is, how do we get them back into the room, back into the present moment, and accepting all of their experiences? Well, this is where we can transform the function of that thought by interrupting them mid-story and stopping them and saying, hey, did you notice what happened right there? And the client may be oblivious or like, what are you talking about? And then this is where the therapist can share their reaction and say, as you were talking, I noticed you were somewhere else. You were back in that memory, or you were back, about that thing that you're concerned about, and you weren't here in the room. And so you want to check with the client to see if they were experiencing the same thing. And if they were, this is where you can start to introduce a cognitive diffusion exercise by saying, hey, I'm wondering if you want to try an experiment with me and try this exercise. Now, the fourth skill that new therapists need to get really good at is how to maximize meaning. You see, the client is not just talking in therapy. They are self-healing as they process their story and add meaning to it. Now, as a therapist, you've been clarifying their values from session to session. And so as a therapist, we're having an inventory of values, and we're bringing those back to the client whenever we can, whenever there's opportunity to reinforce this is what's important to you. And so as a therapist, we need to understand that we can help this client find meaning and purpose in their life. You see, a client is not coming to the therapist just to have their problem solved. I know sometimes it feels like that, like they're looking to us as the professional for advice on how to live their life. But really what they're looking for is a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, and how to approach life in a new way that's more effective. And so as therapists, we facilitate this healing by weaving and overlaps of pattern that we've seen from session to session. So the skill part of this is getting really good at note-taking. I know this is something that they cover in graduate school and in internship. You probably have a way of taking notes, and maybe some just prefer to take notes after the session. But I want to encourage you to get really good at it in session. Don't write down word for word everything they're saying, but when it comes to values, when it comes to thoughts that they tend to be fused with, I like to have those word for word, because then I can say, hey, you remember when you said this a couple weeks ago, you were talking about this and you mentioned this, and that really helps that client to not only know that that what they're saying is important to you as a therapist, but it's also something that helps to add meaning to their story, because they're not thinking about what they talked about several weeks ago with you. So there's a lot of ways you could do this, but I would say using good note-taking, an ability to recall, and then share seamlessly in the session can really help that client to maximize the meaning. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. So maybe comment below which skill that you're really looking to implement this year, and any questions that you have. I'd love to interact with you down in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to go to other places where people may be interested in ACT, or maybe they're an intern, graduate school, or they're just learning ACT and they want a community to help them. So really appreciate you hitting that like button and subscribe. Remember that your journey towards more mindful and improved life starts with a single click.